I didn't start with the black zone. I started with a missing pilot whose case should have been straightforward. A simple delivery run from Fairbanks to a tiny airstrip outside Bethel. The skies were clear. The route was routine. He radioed in just 2 minutes before landing, then vanished off the radar as if the ground had swallowed him whole. Most crashes in Alaska, even in the most rugged terrain, leave debris. Wires, pieces of metal, a fuel slick, something. This one didn't leave a single bolt. The official NTSB report blamed bad weather, even though the pilot's own flight logs said visibility was perfect. The last GPS ping was so close to the runway that rescuers expected to find the wreckage tangled in the trees right at the edge of the field. They found absolutely nothing. It was when I pulled the Freedom of Information Act logs that I noticed something strange in the raw GPS dataset. The flight path didn't just stop at bent. A sharp, impossible deviation upward, almost perfectly vertical, before cutting out completely. No small engine plane can climb like that. Not by accident. And definitely not on purpose. I tried to convince myself it was a glitch, a simple data error, until I found another case, and then another. Each one ended the exact same way. A pilot radioing in that they were in sight of the runway. Seconds later, complete silence. No crash site, no emergency beacon, no wreckage, no bodies, just absence. Alaska officially calls this area the Triangle. Locals call it cursed. Investigators refer to it as statistically anomalous, but buried deep in the old trooper files, they use a different phrase altogether. The black zone. The first reference I found was in a heavily redacted transcript from a helicopter search team. A crewman reported seeing a dark column in the cloud bank just moments before their radar lost contact with the missing plane. He described it as a definite shape, not fog, not a shadow, but something solid and tall, piercing through the ceiling of clouds like a strange dark tower. His recording ends with him asking a chilling question. Why is it moving? I didn't understand what he meant until I started cross-referencing the Charlie Project profiles of people missing from the region. Nearly a dozen pilots, all with eerily similar disappearances. Some were flying small bush planes, others were in commercial cargo planes. One was even a state trooper on patrol. Their final transmissions all followed the same unsettling pattern. Calm, routine, just seconds away from a safe landing. Then a sudden shift. Panic. One pilot's last recorded words were, "Do you see that?" Followed by a sharp intake of breath. Then something in the clouds, static. Another's transmission was cut off mid-sentence. It asked right above me. Every single one of these cases was filed as unresolved. Every audio file ended abruptly, and every attempt I made to interview state officials about them led to a dead end. They either refused to comment or just blamed equipment malfunction. But the strangest, most compelling piece of evidence wasn't from a radio transmission. It was from a GoPro camera. It was recovered from a pilot who had vanished, but whose camera somehow did not. The footage is what you'd expect. Shaky, snow-blurred, nothing particularly unusual. The pilot is calm, humming along to the radio. Then, in the last 10 seconds, the plane banks and the camera's exposure auto-adjusts to the bright sky. That's when you see it, a vertical silhouette. It's not a mountain. It's not a weather phenomenon. It's not anything recognizable. Just a black shape, like a column of pure shadow, rising through the clouds and seeming to bend as if it were alive. The very last frame before the footage cuts to black shows the pilot's hand jerking toward the window. There's a flash of white, then absolute black, then nothing. After that camera was found, search teams swept the area again for the plane. They didn't find a single piece. This should have been national news, a major story. But the files kept getting misclassified, archived incorrectly, or mislabeled as crashes that just didn't leave any debris. One investigator's report casually noted, recovery not feasible due to terrain, even when the terrain in question was flat, open tundra. I managed to track down an old airfield mechanic who had serviced several of the missing planes. When I mentioned the name Black Zone, he went pale. He told me that pilots used to have a dark joke about the tall man in the clouds, a local myth about a strange figure that followed bush planes during whiteouts. But then he told me something that wasn't a joke. He recalled a pilot who came back from a route near the zone, trembling. The pilot insisted he saw a shadow climbing the sky, something that grew darker and more solid as he descended toward the runway. He said it wasn't following him. It was waiting for him. Weeks later, that same pilot took that same route again. He never made it back. 2 nights ago, while I was reviewing the audio logs from one of the disappearances, I noticed something I had missed before, a faint frequency tone buried in the static. It was barely audible, but it was repeating, a pattern, a pulse, almost like a beacon. When I isolated that sound and ran it through a spectrogram, the shape it formed on the screen was a vertical column, jagged at the top, narrow at the base. It looked exactly like the silhouette from the GoPro footage. This morning I checked the FAA updates for the region. A new NORDMA notice to air missions was issued overnight. There was no explanation, no reason given. Just one single line. Avoid designated northern approach due to unidentified aerial obstruction. Unidentified aerial obstruction. They didn't call it weather. They didn't call it turbulence. They didn't call it a known hazard. Just unidentified. Whatever is in that section of the sky, it isn't stationary, and it isn't part of the terrain. Planes don't just vanish in the middle of a landing. GPS signals don't just bend straight upward, and clouds don't cast shadows that move on their own. Something is in the black zone, and whatever it is, it's getting closer to the runways. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow for more investigations into the unknown.